Hi guys, Martin Curry from Agenzia Property Advisory. I'm here with our property analyst Domenico, and as always, our property principal Anthony Spagnolo. How are you, Anthony?
Good, thanks, Martin. How are you going?
I'm excellent. The name of today's podcast is called SDA Property. Hi guys, how are you? How's your week been?
Yeah, pretty good. Busy. Yourself?
I'm excellent. We shot our last podcast, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks back, yeah.
Yeah, we shot that at your golf course.
Yeah, so it was a good backdrop. It was nice to be outdoors, but welcome to the new studio today. It's great to see what you've done with the place.
We've got more lighting on its way, so we apologise for the yellow hue. So, yeah, no, it sounds really pompous when I say we did that at your golf course. Oh. We did that outside your country club. Yeah. I assure you, he's a down-to-earth guy, well worth dealing with. You don't want to work with someone that doesn't have that level of perceived wealth.
It's only 18 holes.
Yeah, it's only 18 holes. It's only 320 odd acres in the centre of southwest Sydney. It's nothing. You know, anyway, no, it is good though. Like, one of the things I really like about you, okay, we mentioned this in the last podcast, but I'm going to say it again because there's a really good chance people are watching this for the first time or listening to it for the first time, right? You're an accountant with 10 years of applied experience, maybe 15 years.
Yeah,
how long
20 years. Yeah.
20 years. Are you that old? I've never asked you your age. Maybe we should talk about it later. So, okay, 20 odd years with an accounting background, but there's been certain types of professions that you've overlaid on top of that. Accounting's just one of those things. You're a licensed real estate agent, obviously. You're a licensed builder. You're a developer, a prolific developer, actually, which I like, and I'll come to talk to you about that in a moment. And you're also a licensed mortgage broker, although you don't. You don't practice as a mortgage broker. It's really
just a credential just to have a bit of a background knowledge for when advising my clients how to structure loans for their purchases. It's just good to have as general knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, well, we do have a team of absolutely brilliant mortgage brokers. I said this last time. I've dealt with, in my work, I've dealt with brokers all over the country, and the broker we've got on the books who heads up our broking team is just extraordinary, isn't he? The reporting that he provides people, the insights and the depth and the level of information.
Yeah, it's a roadmap to success, because a lot of people don't know if they qualify, or if they do, they've got the wrong advice, and a lot of people think they may qualify but may fall short due to having not enough deposit. So essentially, you need, if now's not the right time, you will have the steps that you need to take to get you to that place where you're ready to actually make your whether it's your first purchase or another purchase. Yeah, that guidance.
It's one of those things I love about Agenzia, and of course the last podcast we did was I don't remember if it was number 2 or 3. Do you remember? Number 2, I think.
Number 2. We had a couple of takes. Yeah, the first.
Couple of takes in the first.
Yeah. One. Yeah,
so we'll call it number 2.5. It's like
2.5 men.
It's like a Harry Potter style podcast, isn't it?
Could be us three, 2.5 men.
Platform 8 3/4.
Dom's
9 3/4. Trust you to know that. I watched Harry Potter for the first time 3 nights ago with my kids. Yeah. Platform 9 3/4. Sorry, Dom.
You let the kids watch it?
I regret it. Yeah. I regret it. But my 6-year-old said everyone at her school has seen it, so why can't we? And I thought, it must be. And there are a couple of bits in there. There's a scene where a little kid opens a book and a ghost or something pops out of the book and screams, and then there's these floating black things, and so it's a little bit off-putting. I watched as these things happened. I just felt like hitting stop, but I knew that wouldn't have ended well. So the last thing we did after that is we watched, before I got them ready for bed and everything, I let them watch 15 minutes of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And that just
to settle the mood.
It's the great leveller.
Not the Johnny Depp one?
No. All right. So, yeah, the last podcast we did was on first home buyers. And at the moment, we've got a lot of first home buyer interest, enormous amounts of stuff coming through the door, isn't it? There are a lot of people out there, despite what could be described as horrible economic conditions, recessions at an all-time all-time high, and so on. Interest rates are low, obviously, and a lot of people are still working. Their livelihood is not necessarily threatened at this stage by COVID. And if those people have the security in place by way of job security and so on, it really is a good time to get into the market as a first-home buyer, isn't it?
I think so, with low interest rates, all-time low. And as you mentioned, there's still a lot of the workforce are still working. Government, obviously, with JobKeeper has propped the economy up. And there's also the new builder incentive with 25k grants. So we've seen through the door a great amount of interest in the last month alone, or since it was actually released. But just the last few weeks, the biggest challenge has been getting registered land. So there's a huge demand, but it's a little bit hard to work within the parameters of the guidelines that have been set as part of the grants that you've only got till December to be able to make a purchase or sign a build contract. But there's no, well, especially in Sydney, there's not a whole lot of registered land available. So I think whether the government extend that time frame is yet to be seen. I have heard that they may extend it, but yeah, I think it's a good incentive. However, those parameters make it a little bit difficult to actually take advantage of the grant.
Yeah, fortunately, we have access to enormous amounts of property. There are builders, obviously, that provide home and land packages, and there is probably no better time. There's probably been no better time in the last, I can't tell you how many years, maybe ever, in terms of affordability, if you can afford it. And that's the problem, of course, is there's so much. COVID has introduced so much uncertainty in the market, which kind of leads us on to SDA, because it's a property investment into SDA space, and I like to call it COVID-proof. Nothing's certain. SDA property certainly isn't without its risks, which we'll talk about in a second. A lot of people listening will not know what SDA is and how it relates to the government's NDIS scheme. So, to start us off,
SDA stands for Specialised Disability Accommodation. So it's obviously, as you said, part of the NDIS, which is National Disability Insurance Scheme. So that's just this is the housing component or accommodation component. So there's a lot of 30,000 participants on the waiting list to get into specialised housing. And that number's set to rise to close to 50,000 in the next 2 to 3 years alone.
It's a government-backed program. Let's talk about, you just introduced the fact that it's a component of the NDIS scheme managed by the SDA, which is a specialist disability insurance agency, and the SDA is one of the projects they have in place. So as an investor and then as a participant, how does it all work? How does an investor get involved with the space? Before we talk about any kind of returns or yields or anything like that, which are quite high. Obviously, it's a government-backed program, which and we'll detail that in a moment. So, how does it work from an investor? How do you get involved in this market? And as a participant, how do you gain access to one of these properties? And where do they intersect?
Okay, so as an investor, you have to you work with a property provider, but you have to, in doing your research, obviously that's where we can help. So you're looking for someone that can actually provide you or produce the property. However, that's not the key component. There's a lot of moving parts. So a lot of the builders or developers supplying these homes will often have a relationship with a care provider, a service provider, who are the ones that manage the property and manage like the compliance, the management of the property. They will then have a relationship with a care provider, who are the ones who have the participants. The participants are the people with disabilities that are looking for specialised housing. So there's a bit of a flow. You can't just go and build an SDA home and hope that you're going to have it tenanted upon completion. You actually have to go through the procedures and do your due diligence to make sure that you've got a reputable supplier that will build the home to SDA regulations or standards. And there's a lot of criteria to make to actually get a house signed off by a fully accredited SDA certifier. So you can't, if you build a home with a supplier that doesn't understand all the laws and requirements. So you got bench heights; they have to be at a certain height for people who may be in wheelchairs, so they can reach the bench for livability. The hallways have to be a certain width, so the participants can freely move around. So all these little things need to be taken into consideration. And so if you build a home and it doesn't comply with all these regulations, it's not going to get signed off. And if it's not actually signed off by a accredited certifier, well, then you can't get a head lease with the SDA. So essentially, you can't have it tenanted because the government won't have an agreement with you because obviously it's government backed, and the government will be paying the rent to you, the investor, on behalf of the participants. So if it's not signed off, you can't actually get a lease in place. The leases that are offered are 10 plus 5 plus 5. So unless you do your due diligence and make sure that you have all your bases covered, then it's a risk. It could be a risk by going with the wrong builder that doesn't have the knowledge in this space.
So that's all complex. If you're hearing that for the first time, right?
Your head might be spinning around.
It sounds complicated because it is complicated. So you're saying you've got the government or the SDIA, and you've got the SDA regulatory arm. You've got property management. You have the builders. You have care providers. You have service providers.
Yeah, care providers. There's different care providers out there. Some may look after rehabilitation of a participant, and then there's others like that look after the accommodation or housing aspect. There's about 7,000 or thereabouts Australia-wide that look after the homes. So essentially, it's someone that's registered or been approved for funding through the NDIS will then log or be registered with the care provider and log their interest in a certain area where they may want to live. So,
I'll come back to the areas. So, explain again, because I'm trying to put myself in the position of someone hearing this for the first time. Okay, and if I do that, it is complicated as hell.
Okay.
So, property management. Standard property management is you can't transplant one of these properties into a typical pedestrian, to your local agent and everything else. It's very specialised, isn't it?
Oh, it is, because there's a huge amount of compliance. You need to do audits annually. You need to make sure that the accreditation is maintained. So there's a lot of extra paperwork, as well as keeping that relationship with the care provider. So specific service providers will always have one or multiple care providers that they have daily conversations with, because you may have there's not a high turnover rate in these sort of houses, just due to supply being so low and demand is so high. And usually if someone finds a purposely fit home, they just aren't seen to be wanting to move out. They're pretty happy in that environment, and there's not a high turnover rate.
So the provisions for, and this is where it gets complicated, right? And where the conversation can go on for 5 or 6 hours, right? But you're saying that the tenant, that person who is provided accommodation under the SDA, so into SDA, under the SDA, NDIS scheme, they have the capacity, they have the ability to freely move around properties if and when they choose. All right, is this what you're saying? They can...
Yes, so you get the... if it's a shared home, for example, you will be getting a head lease with the SDA. However, they will may have multiple tenants living within that one home, so or participants as they call it. In a case that a tenant may choose to move out, the SDA will then cover the rent for that participant for 60 to 90 days from the point that they move out. However, after that point, you then obviously have to find a new tenant to occupy that property.
Yeah.
Or that it may be a 4-person occupancy, property, but then one moves out, you have rent still for 90 days whilst they find someone to take that place. So that's why it's imperative to have those relationships going for the event that a participant moves out. You don't want to be left with no tenant. So that's why you have those conversations to see if there's other people looking for accommodation in that area.
I guess that's one of the many potential risks involving an SDA is there is a high turnover. Obviously, that's managed.
No, there's not a high turnover.
Oh, no. Yeah. I didn't mean it like that. Is that what I said?
Yeah. No, I said usually when they move in, which is a good thing. That's safety. But if they do move out, you don't want to be left with no tenant.
Yeah, no, but that is one of the risks with the potential for a turnover. But the government does provide backing for that because they understand it is shared housing. Now, people want to live where they want to live, and this is, I guess, the purpose of the scheme.
Sorry to interrupt, but there is shared housing is a very popular model. There is individual housing, because like any normal person, you got introverts and extroverts. So you got some people that enjoy that aspect of living with others. It gives them that company, and they like to interact with one another, a bit of a family feel, I guess. Whereas there's other people that just like to keep to themselves, and in saying that, they've still got access to be able to live on their own if they choose to do so.
So how many people do you have in the typical SDA property then?
Well, predominantly the ones that we deal with our preferred providers are usually 2 to 4 bedroom SDA homes. However, in some cases, depending on the situation, one of those bedrooms can often be acquired as an OOA, which is a overnight carers quarters, which is depending on the level of participant. So it could be high physical support where they require around the clock care. So in some cases you may have 2 participants and one carer, depending on if the home's built in the way to allow for 2 people of that higher level.
The OOA, or on-site overnight accommodation, that also is encouragement for care providers to place people in these particular homes as well, isn't it? Because they know that their staff will be looked after. They won't be sleeping in the closet or under the stairs.
100%. Look, like I said, there's the different levels there. So if it's the highest level and you require, and that's what your needs are, well then that's what the investor will be getting a higher level rate of return to build a house that's more geared up for that sort of participant. However, in saying that often the care provider will want one of those rooms, and you do get compensated in the table of rates from the SDA. So you're still paid a return for that extra bedroom where the carer will reside. However, there's a whole lot of moving parts to it, as you mentioned before. So.
Okay, let's move ahead a little bit. What sort of returns can an investor expect from one of these properties? Because this is what makes it so appealing. And I'll just jump in and explain really quickly that the government saves enormous amount of money by essentially outsourcing its accommodation to the general market and attracting investors into supporting government programs. They obviously save their money, but they also get a superior product, and they are able to place their participants into homes that essentially add to their well-being. They live where they want to live in conditions that suit them. They still have the appropriate care. Some people are now migrating out of nursing homes where they've been for years and years and years into these SDA homes, obviously having an enormous impact on their quality of life, which I guess is the purpose, isn't it? The purpose is to provide these people with the quality of life that they deserve. Yep. They shouldn't have to live in a manner that is any different to the way that we live. Yeah, they shouldn't have any fewer options, should they?
Oh, of course. They've been forgotten in the past. A lot of people with disabilities, and the funding hasn't been there from the government. So it's the biggest social scheme, only second to Medicare. So it's got a good the feel good factor that you're actually helping people, and they deserve to be placed in specialised housing that's allows them to have a high level or higher quality of life. So, as you said, previously a lot of participants were placed in inadequate housing, nursing homes. You may have people in their 30s living with the elderly. They don't see daylight. They've got no... they're not allowed to get out of the home. They don't have access to transport, like a nursing home may be nowhere near a train station. They're in a wheelchair. Their wheelchair, only the battery of the wheelchair can't get them too far. So, it's just, where can they go? Like, it's depressing. They often get depression. And see, as you mentioned before when you spoke to a care provider, there was one participant that had about 4 different roommates within a short space of time, just because in the nursing home they saw people die off. So it's not for a young person. It's not an ideal environment.
A nursing home or aged care is people were placed into those facilities because the government had nowhere else to put them. And it's essentially brushing them aside, isn't it? It was a horrible way of treating people. And SDA has essentially restored their dignity, restored their independence, which they always had, but they weren't treated as though, it was there. So it's a magnificent program that's done some really good things. And obviously the government inviting private investors, that's ex-copper. Private investors into the mix has provided, and the government appreciates that people are investing in a government program. So the yields are quite high, aren't they?
Oh, of course. You often get yields between 8 to sort of 15% net per annum. That's realistic. Like, you often see out there other companies advertising 20%, but that may like the land component's your only variable factor. So they may put a house in Whoop Whoop, and they can advertise higher rates, but really, who wants to live out in Whoop Whoop? I guess so. It's just realistically, 8 to 15% is what we're seeing in the market for good purposes, purchases. That is.
There is a town in Australia called Whoop Whoop, isn't there? So when you say who'd want to live out in Whoop Whoop, those
what's
residents
the population there?
I'll have to get Dom to pull that up on his phone.
The numbers, man, Dom.
Have you got your phone with you? No. Anyway.
I'm not allowed to refer to Whoop Whoop in the future?
Well, when you say who'd want to live in Whoop Whoop, those people that live in Whoop Whoop want to live there.
Sorry, Whoop Whoop residents. No offence.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. So, moving on, you said, and we've seen people advertise. Look, in some cases with some kinds of properties, you can get high yields. Those yields are there, but like you said, it's a mix of the build and the property and the circumstances that provides that, and certainly the number of residents you have in it. It's a very complex myriad of mathematical wizardry that takes place in this, all crunched together in an algorithm and spits out, this number, and it's impossible to navigate that space, those spreadsheets and everything.
That's the rate of the SDA rates, is that correct?
SDA rates.
Yeah, we had some fun going through those numbers.
Because some of it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. But I guess at this point in time, do you have, and I haven't asked you this, so I don't know if you have an answer, is there a specific location, say in Sydney or Southeast Queensland or in Victoria, and a specific area and a specific house that kind of adds up to the perfect storm, if you like, and the perfect storm being the perfect calm?
Well, as you know, we've done most of our transactions to date in Southeast Queensland because that's where our original relationship, sort of our journey began in this space. In saying the perfect storm, obviously you want a good balance of, it depends what your strategy is, but if you're going for a cash flow play or a capital growth play, capital growth, you want to be closer to the city. So you can get some infill sites close to Brisbane CBD, for example, where you're going to still get relatively higher returns because land is obviously cheaper in that state than it is to, say, the Sydney market. There is a location index factor that does allow for the location of a property. However, it's very minute, and so Brisbane is still the market that we'd suggest because it's it's very balanced. Probably in the northern corridor, so from north all the way up to sort of the Sunshine Coast, I guess. But yeah, with a lot of our purchases sort of in Moreton Bay region. Caboolture, for example, is one place that we've done a fair few builds or transactions for clients. So there's no perfect mix. It just depends what your desired outcome is, I guess.
And a lot of it, like you said before, depends upon where SDA participants themselves want to live, where there's demand. Because you don't just pick a location that's got a good yield. You find out where these people want to live, and you essentially provide them with.
Well, at the moment, due to there being such a shortage in housing, and like I said, 30,000 registered participants looking for housing, and nowhere near even a quarter of that being fulfilled. So I think for the next 10 years, as long as you get indicative, like there is an SDA map showing where registered participants are. However, it's not totally accurate. Because that's where they're living now. They may live with their parents, or wherever where they currently may be residing. However, that doesn't mean that's their dream location where they want to live. So if there's housing, more abundance of housing out there, then they may move around. So that's not accurate. That's why it's important to have those relationships with the care providers in place, because they're the ones who give us the detailed level of information as to what the requirements are of the participants and where they may actually want to live in reality.
Yeah, so I guess it's important to crunch those numbers, which is where Domenico comes in, the nerd of the operation.
Tell us a bit about your fun crunching the numbers with the SDA tables, Dom. You were our brains.
Yeah, it wasn't very straightforward. We started.
This is going back a long time when we first entered the market a couple of years ago.
A funny scenario was that we figured out that a two-room high physical support unit, you actually get a higher rate of return by having one participant living in there than if you had both rooms occupied.
Yeah.
So
the numbers. That was when we had to investigate because it didn't make sense, and to this day I still don't understand why. Maybe you have an answer now.
No, there's that.
It's just the government's number crunching. That's
not sure yet. We'll find out the answer. We'll keep you updated.
Yeah, but does that preclude a second person moving in? That's a really good point, because you do get more, and it's bizarre to say this out loud, but you get more with one participant in a two-bedroom unit than you do two. So is that one participant obligated to get to share with that second person? Is that up to them? Is that up to the care provider? Is that up to property management? Who makes that decision?
Well, I think the investor's the one that's going to be obviously takes the hit because they get less return than they potentially could if they're forced, or not forced, but you've got a relationship with the care provider, so you've got to keep the care provider happy. So the care provider, I think you just got to. It's what they've got on their list and what how they desire to fill the place. So I'm not too sure.
But the investor doesn't have that level of control, do they? So it's managed kind of autonomously.
Well,
isn't it? Is that how it always applies? Sometimes.
Well, the manager, the service provider, work with the care provider, but there's a relationship there, like any relationship, whether it's a husband and wife, or you got to compromise. So I mean, at the end of the, so I've been told.
That's okay, you need to meet my wife.
No, that's what I've been told.
Yeah, okay. That's how it works with some people.
Yeah.
I believe.
I'm in the same boat. That's right.
Okay, so it depends. I know this is a new program, and all the test cases haven't been applied yet. It's a very much a growing industry, so we don't have answers for everything. And in those cases, really, I think does depend on, from my discussions and whatnot with care providers and property management and so on. That is one of those grey areas, and I don't think anyone has an answer yet. People like to think they do, but they don't. So let's just talk really, really briefly about property management, because SDA kind of implies people with, at times, certainly in the high physical support properties, it's very difficult for them to manage gardens and lawns and maintenance and so on. So again, property management will take care of that.
Yeah, property management, it's all inclusive with the provider or service provider group that manage the properties that we place our investors in. So that's, they're pretty easy to maintain, I guess, in that aspect. They've still got a nice look and feel, where they got usually have large bedrooms, own ensuite with wheelchair access, obviously. You've got a large kitchen, so if you've got family members over visiting, you can use that area. Also, as well as a breakout area, which is another area, just if you want to entertain or the participants
that's a really good
mix.
point. I'll interrupt there, because that's a really fantastic point. Is these homes are amazing homes. They're not moving into something that looks like a hospital or a nursing home or any of those kinds of. These are just standard homes that are built to a specific standard, aren't they?
Yeah.
But they are beautiful home with amazing finishes, aren't they?
100%. Yeah, they are. The good thing is we went down for example, the unit model. We found that to be not exactly like a warm, homely feel. Or as well, the exit strategy was not ideal. So you couldn't just on-sell it to a normal residential buyer, I guess. Whereas these homes are built solid, all sort of concrete walls, so little maintenance, no gyprock. Yes, but in saying that, from the outside, they look exactly like a residential home, any other home located in that street. So they can be, like, if you choose to do so as an investor, the risk isn't there, because you can convert it to a normal residential home and sell it if need be. But I don't think there's any risk anyhow. If you've got a high yielding investment, why would you want to convert it? And yeah, as I said, there's 10 plus 5 leases available. So this government scheme is actually here to stay long term. For the next 20 years at least, the government has allocated 700 million per year as a minimum towards the funding of the SDA accommodation. Or SDA, Specialised Disability Accommodation, that is.
So where does Agenzia fit in?
Where we fit in is that this has become, over the last 18 months to 2 years, this has become our niche. been a challenge, but like as we've said, the moving parts, you're probably still scratching your head to a certain extent, trying to work it all out. But that's where we come in. So if it is an investment that you're interested in finding out more about, we can hold your hand and give you a more in-depth, deep dive, I guess, and analysis. And
yeah, I like to think of Agenzia as the juggler.
Yeah.
He's because there are so many moving parts. He sits there, or the conductor, standing up the front and conducting in an orchestra, because there are so many people involved in this project. And I couldn't imagine perfectly, like previously having not, obviously the SDA scheme is really, really new, right? But when I first got involved, I didn't think it would take me as long as it did to catch up on what it involves, what it entails, the regulations, the compliance, and to understand the difference between the various providers, because there are some really bad care providers, and there are some really bad property managers, and there are some really bad builders. And you see a lot on even websites like Gumtree. People are buying or building these properties and then going to Gumtree in order to rent them. So
it's crazy.
They're losing
crazy.
money.
And as well, look, we specialise in the new build space because obviously, as I mentioned before, there's so many regulations that you have to comply with to be able to get a property approved. So when you build new, you obviously are building exactly to that spec.
We're checking the batteries on the microphone when we do this, by the way.
Yeah, and,
sorry.
So you got to build to that spec. So you're not going to retrofit a property, because to get it to tick all those boxes, it's going to be very costly. And as well, when you go to the back to the table of rates of what you're going to receive in rent, for a retrofit property, you're lucky to get around the quarter of what you can achieve when you build a new property. So it's a no-brainer. Then that's why we don't deal in retrofitting. We only deal in new. And when you provide a new property, you're giving someone a top product, and that's what these participants deserve. They deserve to live in a nice new home that's fully functional for their needs, and it's A grade.
Yeah, they don't deserve to live in any lesser conditions or circumstances or location than anybody else. And unfortunately, until now, that's what has applied.
They've been forgotten about, which isn't fair. And then,
it's awful.
You said to me once previously, because it did seem a bit complex, you said it's our obligation to see this through, and that's what we have done. And I'm happy that we've followed this path and persevered, and we have our head around it. There's obviously always things to keep up to date with and learn, but that's what we pledged to do.
Yeah, one of the last things, I'm glad you said that, because that's a really important point. It is an obligation, especially considering your involvement in charity and so on. But we'll go into that another time. So one of the last things I want to talk about is owner-occupied SDA properties, because if you're the family of somebody that sadly has been afflicted with something that causes them to require SDA accommodation, that family themselves can invest in that property, and they can still generate a yield, particularly if it's a shared premises. But they can generate a yield that will more than pay it off, essentially give their family member what is essentially an income off the property.
Of course, yeah. Well, if you know that your son, daughter that has a disability, they're approved for an NDIS plan, they may get a lump sum payment up front, and you may manage their funds. You can essentially use those funds to purchase the property on behalf of your child if you're the trustee, or I don't know the exact setup. Every case is different. But or you may have the fund yourself, and why not purchase a property and get government rent back for looking after your own child within that house if need be. You can be the carer.
That camera turned off. Those batteries, seriously. No, that one I just need to recycle those batteries or something. That's fine. Okay, the very last thing I wanted to talk about, I probably had in my head before I noticed that camera had died. Dom, do you want to jump in while my brain reboots.
Like the camera.
Have you got anything that? Oh, so another microphone's gone dead. Awesome.
I just thought you didn't want to participate any longer, though.
Yeah, it's. So I guess is there anything else that you want to introduce yourself that I might not have touched on? Because look, it is just so complex. If you're looking at getting in the space, guys, give Anthony a call, and he may be able to help you specifically for your circumstances. But even if you just
Look, if you're an investor, we can help you with understanding the process and give you some options to review. And if you're a participant or know someone that's got a disability or they're looking for more information, we're more than happy to assist in any way. As we've got relationships with care providers already, we can point you in the right direction. We know we have legal teams that are right around the whole SDA plan, whether it's got to do with the housing component or if it's a holistic approach and they want someone to help them get approved for funding through the NDIS. Well then, yeah, we're here to help in whatever way possible.
Borrowing is something we should probably touch on right before we sign off, because borrowing for SDA is a little bit complex, isn't it? Because the standard bill cost is a little bit higher than normal. The banks still haven't caught up with valuations. So how does that impact upon the purchase?
Well, there's only a few lenders to date that are actually giving funding in the SDA space. The ones that we've seen so far are Latrobe, Liberty and Mortgage House. The big four haven't come on board as yet, even though NAB have said that they've allocated $2 billion towards SDA funding. However, we're yet to see any real funds solidify or any loans being done through NAB at this point. There is a large fit-out component in these homes to like hoist in every room. Some houses have smart integration, wider hallways, beams for did I say that already? Beams for hoists? No,
I don't know.
And yeah, so there's a larger fit-out component to the standard home. That's usually where a valuer may come in and only value this home because it looks like the home next door for better. So they can only their value can only stack up to another four better in the street. However, there may be 100,000 to 150,000 in extra bill costs. So there's often a shortfall. But in saying that, we've had two recent purchases for some clients of ours, and one was on the dollar value for its valuation. The other one was only 20,000 short, which is very good because that's
but that also isn't typical, is because typically the LVR that applies when borrowing is what?
On these, usually may need 35 to 40% deposit for the construction period. That is.
Yes.
Often, then once you have the property tenanted and signed off by the SDA, then you get a head lease with the SDA also, and you get it tenanted, and you're out of that construction period. So you have essentially your OC. You can then refinance, get a lower rate, and get some equity out to treat it as a standard loan. So it's just because it's a new product that they're requiring that upfront deposit to account to allow for that extra fit out component.
Yeah, and excuse me, the again, I got all this information bouncing around in my head, but it really needs a reboot after a long day. We're recording this. We did this at it's 8 o'clock at 8:30 at night or something. After a long day, it catches up with you. So that's what I was going to ask. Are they all dual contract? They all two contracts?
No, to date that has been the challenge. However, we now have a solution where the developer will take the 30% of the build cost into their trust account, and essentially they can make it a single contract. So it's good for super purchases, as you know. You only can have single contracts.
Yes.
So, there's only that. Yeah, there is a workaround. To this point, that's only like a new thing that the developers sort of come up with. But prior to that, it was a little bit more difficult. But we've got a solution now and it is a great super investment, like because of the returns are so high. And usually to borrow in super, you may need 30% deposit anyhow, so it's not far off.
So if someone's interested, by all means, we have the expertise on staff. Expertise I don't think you'll find elsewhere in Sydney. In fact, even along the east coast of Australia. We've got a really fantastic in-house finance team that is rather extraordinary, headed up by a guy called Adam. And then you've got the capacity to assist people through the process of self-managed super funds. As an accountant, just out of curiosity, again, I've never asked you this before. Did you do anything with self-managed super as an accountant?
Oh, I don't have my practice anymore, so I'm just focused on property, and we've got accountants that work in our team, and that we can definitely refer you on to and give you some advice. But that's just, even if we're to have a general conversation, I'll be able to provide that advice free of charge.
If you're after a consultation, give Anthony a call. You can visit our website at www.agenzia.com.au. That's agenzia.com.au. Your email address is anthony@agenzia.com.au. I'll spell that again. It's agenzia.com.au. Agenzia means Mr. Western Sydney in Italian. I make that joke all the time. It's not funny anymore. It used to be. It's funny the first time I said it.
So you got new viewers, new audience. Maybe
they've never heard it before. And if people want to call you, I'll give them your direct mobile number.
Yep, that's fine.
What's that?
0414 745 684.
As always, guys, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. We hope you learned something. And if you are interested, by all means, touch base. Until next time.
Thanks for your time.
Goodbye.